Good morning, Chairman. We're now live.
Good morning. I would like to welcome everyone present in the chamber and those listening online to the business of the Highways and Transport Scrutiny Committee meeting. My name is Councillor Mike Brooks and I am the chairman of this committee. Councillor Alex Hall, vice chairman of this committee, is also in attendance here on my right. Can I remind you that the audio-visual feed of this formal public meeting is being broadcast live via the County Council's website, and all your comments will remain accessible online, as the meeting recording remains on the Council's website. There is no fire drill plan this morning. In the event of the fire alarm sounding, we need to leave the Council chamber through the rear doors and leave the building through the reception and assemble in the front car park and await further instructions. Can I request everyone present to ensure your mobiles, laptops and iPads are on silence for the duration of this meeting? May I remind you that the hearing loop is now activated. Requests to speak will be collated by the Vice Chairman, and we will try to ensure that everyone has the opportunity to ask questions and make contributions. However, I will close down the debate to ensure we keep to time. Therefore, I would appreciate contributions to be succinct and concise, and also ask that you indicate early when you wish to speak. We will now move into the formal agenda. Item 1 on the agenda is apologies for absence, replacement members, and over to Tom to...
Thank you, Chairman. No apologies for absence have been received.
Thank you. Moving on then, declarations of members' interest. This is the opportunity for members to declare any pecuniary interest or other interest. Does anybody wish to declare any interest that's not on the DPI forms? No? Right, I can move on then to the next part of the agenda, which is item 3, which is the minutes of the meeting held on 29th of January 2024. What I'll do, it's pages 5 to 12 of the agenda pack, and this is to approve and sign the minutes of the last meeting. And I'll just go through them page by page just to make sure if anybody's got any comment on the accuracy of the minutes, just to enable the opportunity to say. So I'll go through them. Page 5, page 6, page 7, page 8, page 9, page 10, and page 11. No indication, so can we have a proposal, please, for accuracy of the minutes to receive them? Thank you, Councillor Stokes, and a seconder, Councillor Hall, thank you. So proposed and seconded, and could all those in favour of the minutes please indicate no? Thank you. Anyone against? And abstentions, presumably because we weren't present at the last meeting. Thank you. Right, I'll move on then to item 4, which is announcements by the chairman, executive councillors and lead officers. I have no announcements this morning, and we have a busy agenda as always with 2 pre-decision items to consider. Therefore, I should like to ask officers presenting reports to take these as read by members and only summarise key points and the type of input expected by the committee. Introductions of reports will be capped at 5 minutes to ensure we have sufficient time to consider and debate. So moving on now then, executive councillor announcements. Have we any executive councillor announcements? Councillor Davis.
Good morning, Chairman.
Thank you. Good morning.
Good morning, Chairman. Nice to see you. I just wanted to, rather than a massive announcement, just comment on the news last week from the government about a record £262 million worth of funding over 7 years for Lincolnshire. Just to kind of reiterate the point, really, this is really great news. It represents not only a substantial increase in funding of in excess of £35 million a year, but also it recognises a long-standing desire we've had to see year-on-year investment, which will make a real difference to our supply chain. The only thing I would caveat it with slightly before members start spending, £30 million in their heads in their divisions is it does rely on the incumbent government winning the general election. So I would add a note of caution to any expectations to whether this will actually happen. But that aside, it represents a real sea change in DfT viewing of rural authorities like ours, and I'm very excited about it. That was it, Mr. Chairman. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Davies. That's good news, and let's hope it all comes to fruition. Thank you for that. Right, I'll move on then to senior officers' announcements. Have we any announcements from senior officers?
No, Chairman, from Karen Casa.
Okay. Thank you, Karen. Thank you for that. Right, I'd just like to, then to welcome Mike Reid as the new head of transport. He is attending on Teams, so welcome, Mike, and look forward to meeting you soon. It's okay? Thank you.
Thank you, Chairman.
Right, I'll move on then to the next item on the agenda, which is item 5, which is the Grantham Future High Streets Fund, Marketplace and Station Approach projects. And this is a pre-decision scrutiny report, and it can be found on pages 13 to 22 of the agenda pack. The report provides an overview of the Future High Streets Fund projects in Grantham, focusing on marketplace and station approach. These projects align with South Kesteven District Council Master Plan for Grantham, emphasising public realm enhancements to foster growth and improve the overall experience. The feasibility report details the marketplace and station approach projects, integral components of South Kesteven District Council's broader Future High Street Fund programme for Grantham. A decision is due to be considered by the Executive Councillors for Resources, Communications and Commissioning, and the Highways, Transport and IT Executive Councillor, respectively, between 11th of March and the 15th of March 2024. It is asked that we consider the report and determine whether we support recommendations to the Executive Councillors, and that we agree any additional comments to be passed on to the Executive Councillors in relation to this item. The report will be presented by Sam Edwards, Head of Highways Infrastructure and Laboratory Services. And I'll hand over to you now, Sam. Thank you. Good morning.
Thank you, Chairman, and morning all. So this is one of the schemes that I've been reporting on a quarterly basis within the overall major update, but we're getting to the stage where a key decision or a pre-key decision needs to be made. So I'll start with saying that, as I have done previously, this is not a county council-led scheme. This is a scheme that's led and owned and driven by South Kesteven District Council. We were involved at the early stages of the bid proposal, not necessarily in saying we do this scheme or we do that scheme, but making sure it's grounded in something that's deliverable and acceptable to the county council. The district council's overall bid was successful with just over £8 million, of which a proportion of funding went to these two projects. So there are wider things that the district council is delivering. These two projects are what we've colloquially called around the marketplace and station approach. And just for on, not to get confused with station approach from the scheme that was about 10 years ago, it's very, very different to that and less impactful in a way, or less difficult to deliver. So we're at the stage where we're looking to let a contract in order for the county council to facilitate and build the works on behalf of the district council. The first scheme is Marketplace. We've just got the tenders back at the end of last week, so we're just going through those costs at the moment. But the intention is there's a few queries when we go through that. If we're happy, then we would let that contract and start mid-April. Following on from that, There's a few options regards the station approach scheme. We could go out to tender for that again, or we could talk to the contractor that's won this one and see if there's economies of scale within there. That will come out of the woodwork as we go through those discussions. But the intention is to finish one and then move on to the next one at station approach, because there's a lot of work taking place in Grantham in this coming year. So dovetailing it all together. And just on that, just to say, we've got programmed for a community engagement event towards the end of March to let the local members and the community know about all the works that are taking place, which includes these two projects. So from an affordability perspective, the scheme proposals in this report are about on what the district council's budgeted. However, the cost that we've got back for the initial is less than what we've got in this report, because it's live information. So that gives a little bit of comfort and a little bit more sort of room for risk or anything to happen on site. With regards to the actual schemes themselves, the first one that I think I've explained previously, but the first one is in the marketplace. It's essentially between the three tabletops, is lifting the carriageway to the same level as the footway and incorporating block paving. The reason being, it doesn't change the highway alignment, doesn't change the highway flows in any way, but it's to give a level surface for events for the future, which the district council are of the view that they are discouraged at this time because of the differing levels. The second scheme is the station approach scheme, which is very much about improving the user experience as you exit the station and enter into the centre of Grantham. It is a fairly industrial area as you go through that junction, and it's about dropping the islands, what's called Kensington-style islands, taking rid of some of the pedestrian barriers and some of the more shall we say, industrial feel of the area, and making it a little bit softer and a more aesthetically pleasing area to go through. So that's the principles of the two schemes and where we're at. And this is, as I say, a pre-decision paper in order to let the contracts. So I'll pause there and ask for any questions.
Thank you, Sam. Have we any questions or contributions from Councillor Stokes?
Yeah, I might as well come first as the one of the local members for the station. Well, as the local member for Station Approach, I certainly do welcome this investment, especially on the station approach. I mean, the scheme for this is very different to the one 10 years ago, as Sam alluded to. My concern still relates to the costings. I know you've said you've had some back that is less than what's in the paper, which is welcomed, but there are going to be, as always with projects, unforeseens. Are you confident that we'll still have the money will not run out, basically, and we'll have enough money to complete both projects?
Over to you, Sam, on that one.
It's always a difficult one to give 100% surety, as we've had these kind of conversations before, because capital works by their very nature add levels of risk. But what we've done to mitigate that is, I'm not going to go through the exact details of the costs because it would be inappropriate at this stage until we've gone through it, but we are talking the initial one is significantly less, hundreds of thousands less than what's in there, which gives us a little bit more room. I will stress within those overall numbers, there's about 400,000 of risk. That would be on top of any reduction that we had in the cost coming through. And the way that we've programmed this to mitigate is if, for example, you're carrying on with marketplace and the cost for whatever reason do escalate, then you've got the ability to tailor the station approach scheme. Either de-scope it, not do it, things like that if one's starting, so we can mitigate our risk through that process as well to make it scalable. But ultimately, I can't sit here and say it will definitely fall within that budget, but my experience tells me that I think it will.
Thank you, Sam. Councillor Davies has asked if he can come in. Richard, over to you, Richard.
Thank you. Yeah, thank you, Chairman. I thought I ought to speak really as the local member for the marketplace scheme. I think it's fair to say, and Adam and others will be very aware of this, there's been substantial public opposition to particularly the marketplace scheme, and it does put us in a difficult position. As Sam has said, this isn't a scheme that we've brought forward. We're doing it on behalf of the district council, and I am in discussions with the leaders and the leadership team there to try and, how should we say, facilitate them providing some justification and sponsorship for the scheme. I've received a number of very serious objections to the scheme fundamentally, it's down to the length of time it's going to put the marketplace out of action for a perceived minimal benefit. So we are pushing back and asking the district council to really kind of come out the traps and justify the scheme in order to garner some support from the public. But as we stand here today, I don't think it's 100% confirmed that particularly the marketplace scheme will go ahead, because it needs some justification, and the traders in particular need to understand why it's being done, and we need some public buy-in. At the moment, we just don't have that.
Thank you, Councillor Davies. Councillor Stokes, did you want to come back on that? Okay. Councillor Vernon.
Thank you, Chairman. So, sort of, Councillor Davies has almost touched on the point that I've made regarding that I'm going to make regarding the disruption to traders and people who are driving through Grantham. Grantham is very, very difficult to drive through at certain points in the day, and especially when traffic flow is heavily affected by issues on the surrounding major routes. I think engagement has got to be key, and it does worry and concern me slightly that there isn't the buy-in from the members of the public at this stage. Are we sort of doing any work on that, or is that all falling to the District Council to do? Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Vernon. Sam.
So as I say, this is a South Kesteven District Council-led project, and we would expect the District Council to lead the communications on the purpose, the drive, the benefits of the project. What we have committed to do is to, as the facilitators of the work, to explain the practical implications, traffic management, the effects on businesses on a day-to-day basis that we're comfortable to do, and are looking at employing a public liaison officer to act in that position. In addition, I mentioned earlier, we're looking to put together towards the end of this month a public engagement event, which will be more than just these two projects, but there's lots of work taking place in Grantham. There's 3 large reconstruction schemes, 2 or 3 pedestrian crossings and development works and some other things all taking place. So we've had a lot of detailed discussions about traffic management across the whole town and how they interact with programmes between each other to mitigate and limit the impact. But the nature of these types of works, you're exactly right, they will cause a level of disruption. But from a facilitating the works, the best thing we can do is to inform the people of what's going to happen, reduce it where we can. But to stress what Councillor Davies was saying is that we do expect the District Council to be leading the purpose, the drive and the benefits of this project.
Thank you.
Thank you for that, Sam, and thank you, Councillor Vernon. Have we got any other comments, contributions on that? No, we haven't. I'll just, before we go to voting on anything, I just wanted to bring out what the recommendations are, and we're here to approve the undertaking of an appropriate procurement process in relation to the delivery and construction of the scheme, and delegate to the Executive Director of Place in consultation with the Executive Council of Highways, Transport and IT authority to take all decisions necessary to progress the schemes, including the detailed terms, awards and entering of any contract or other documentation necessary to ensure the delivery and construction of the scheme. So that is so purely about the contracts and delivering the schemes. Now, we've heard from Councillor Davies that there's still discussions ongoing about the marketplace and whether that will actually come to fruition or not. But I think we leave that in the comments, but what we're voting on is the contracts and the process, which I think we can sort of park the uncertainty about the marketplace scheme on one side when we're voting on that. But, you know, we can still bear all of that in mind. So I would then, I think we'll move on to this vote. And I'm going to propose that the designated scrutiny officer records the key findings and comments raised by the committee. And I think it's just the uncertainty about the marketplace scheme and some concerns about costs. And I think costs getting out of control, and we don't want that anything falling back on the county council have to pay, because this has been funded through South Kesteven District Council's bid for money on this. So I'm going to propose that our designated scrutiny officer records the key findings and comments raised by the committee, and I move that the committee supports the proposed recommendations, and these are set out on page 15 of the report, and I ask that the comments raised by this committee be shared with the Executive Councillor as for their consideration ahead of the decision being made on the 6th of February. Do I have a seconder? Thank you, Councillor Hall. So it's proposed and seconded, so we will now vote. All those in favour? Thank you, that's unanimous. So just check, no one against, no one abstaining. No, that's a unanimous in favour. So we'll move on to the next item on the agenda. The next item on the agenda is the public rights of way fees and charges. This is a pre-decision scrutiny report, and associated appendices can be found on pages 23 to 50 of the agenda pack. The report introduces the development of new and updated fees and charges for the public rights of way services. This initiative arises from a comprehensive review of the service, existing fees and recent legislation incorporating new work and cost recovery mechanisms. Notably, the previous charges, stagnant for approximately 15 years, no longer align with the escalating costs associated with these services. This report seeks that the Executive Councillor for Economic Development, Environment and Planning approves the proposed fees, and additionally request authorisation for annual increases. The Executive Councillor will consider a decision between the 5th and 15th of March 2024. It's asked that we consider the report and determine whether we support the recommendations to the Executive Councillor as set out in the report, and that we agree any additional comments to be passed on to the Executive Councillor in relation to this item. The report will be presented by Chris Miller, Head of Environment, and Andrew Fletcher, the Public Rights of Way and Access Manager, is also present to support Chris. So I'll hand over to Chris now. Good morning, Chris.
Good morning, Chairman. Thank you very much. I'm actually going to pass presenting duties to Andrew as the new Public Rights of Way and Access Manager.
Thank you. Over to you then, Andrew.
Thank you very much, Chairman. Your summary was summed up most of what I was talking about. I'll go into a little bit more detail. So the fees and charges cover two separate parts of the public rights of way work, one of which is landowner declarations, which enable a landowner to effectively protect their land from the acquisition of new rights of way. And the other part is what we call public path orders, which relate to diversions and extinguishments of existing rights of way. The new charges that you refer to is a new service that we can offer for effectively pre-application advice for diversions and extinguishments, and this would enable a landowner to have some engagement time with us to further define their plans and come up with a more acceptable proposal and make it more palatable to the public. As you've mentioned, the fees haven't been updated for some time, and they've lagged behind the actual cost of providing the service, so it looks to bring them up to date, but also to keep them up to date if there's any particular staff charges or other costs that element. Most of the actual costs of these are legal costs and staff costs. So the set of new charges have been developed based on the average of how much it costs us. The legislation that enables us to charge is very strict in that we're only able to charge what it costs us and not to make a profit. And so the charges have been developed on the exact sort of averages that it costs us. We've undertaken a benchmarking exercise to see where we are with local authorities, but the fundamental charges are based very clearly on what it costs us, so that it's a defensible position. It's recommended that the Executive Councillor considers and approves the report, and also considers and approves the proposal to increase the charges based on the actual cost increase and any prevailing CPI percentage rate for any other costs, such as materials and things like that. And I'll stop there and invite any questions. Thank you.
Thank you for that, Andrew. Councillor Ashton would like to speak. Councillor Ashton.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chairman. Just to say that I really do welcome the paper. It seemed to make a huge amount of sense, introducing the pre-planning service where we don't currently have it. Anything that allows, as we see right across planning and this sort of thing, that ability to have that contact, to have that process, really does smooth the future processes as you move along the tracks. And in terms of fees and everything else, they absolutely have to cover as far as possible the costs of administering that work, and it makes perfect sense to bring all of that into alignment. I'm very happy to move the paper, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you, Councillor Ashton. And we've got Councillor Vernon, though, who would like to speak before we... thanks for moving the paper, though.
Thank you.
Councillor Vernon.
Thank you, Chairman. I agree totally as well that a fixed fee is better than variables for the reasons that we've discussed and that were in the report. One of the things that I would say is that some of these are going to be subject to a very large increase, in my view, sort of given what's currently being charged. And I recognise that that's not necessarily a proportionate charge based on sort of hours spent, and I welcome the information you've given us in the report. But I'm just conscious here that sort of this is one of those scenarios where a charge has not been kept up to the date over the years, and it's warranting sort of a larger increase now, which sort of members of the public may look at and go, gosh, this is a huge increase, whereas if we'd sort of increased sort of slightly over the years to cover the cost, that wouldn't be the case. Nonetheless, having said that, sort of obviously, although that is the case, I agree totally that a fixed fee is better than having all of the variables that then take time to work out and leave a large margin for error when staff are working out the fees. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Vernon. Andrew, have you got anything to add to that?
Thank you, Chair. I do agree it does look from the offset that it's a huge increase. From the discussions we've had with people who are waiting for diversion orders, it hasn't particularly put them off. But one of the things that the charges do is now stagger the costs. So there's particular phases where costs are due, so it will spread the cost out rather than a huge lump at the end. We haven't had any particular, from the discussions I've had, any pushback on that, and it's in line with other districts and other ones. It's sort of expected.
Have we, anyone else? Well, I'd just like to know about the communicating this out to the public about the increases in charges and explaining where we're coming from, and the annual charges, so to automatically increase annually, how will that be communicated out to the public, and what sort of consultation and will be done on that? Have you got any comment on that, please?
Thank you, Chair. I wasn't planning a particular communication out, but I was planning to publish all the fees and charges so that people can see before they apply what kind of costs they're likely to be. With regard to a consultation, if, for example, staff costs have increased and it's pushed the amount up, we're not sure what the consultation would achieve unless it was either meet the costs or don't meet the costs, in which case we end up subsidising. But effectively communicating on the web prior to any application seems to be the best way in my mind.
Yeah, how will it affect people who've already got applications going through? Will they be, so they'll start the process off with one cost, will they continue at that, or will they have to pay increases? Just for clarity, please.
The applications that we're currently dealing with would be at the cost that we've quoted them at the start.
And the other question I got was the increase from fees and charges on an annual basis. How will it be ensured that these go towards the service, towards the cost of the public rights of way service?
Yeah, thank you, Chairman. I'll pick that one up. So with the changes in the legislation, the government expectation is that the increased amount of work and bureaucracy that we have to put towards doing the changes in the legislation and towards public path orders will require extra resources. So to do that, we will need to reinvest to actually provide those extra resources. So it will become like a circular position.
And will the increase in charges go any way to reducing the waiting time it is for people requesting diversions? Because it does seem to take a very long time, years, to get these diversions completed.
It'll certainly help in that we will have extra resources to process those. Obviously, we will expect there to be more actual applications as well. So we'll be trying to keep a pace of that and keeping that under review and monitoring it to make sure that it doesn't come out of control and that we are actually reducing those time frames as you suggest.
Okay, thank you. Right, no more people, no more councillors indicating to speak. So I'm going to move on then to the vote. And I'm going to propose that, I'm going to propose, already Tom Ashton, Councillor Tom Ashton has moved the report, but just to put that into words, the proposal would be that our designated scrutiny officer records the key findings and comments raised by the committee. Those will have been captured, and I move that the committee, Tom will have moved that the committee supports the report and agrees with the recommendation to the Executive Councillor as set out on page 25, and I ask that the comments raised by this committee be shared with the Executive Councillor for his consideration ahead of the decision being made. And I will second Councillor Ashton's proposal if you're prepared to accept those words, Councillor Ashton. Thank you. So it's proposed and seconded. With all those in favour, please indicate. Again, that is unanimous, so I'm not going to ask for against and abstentions this time. I can see it's unanimous. Right, moving on then to the next item on the agenda, which is the Highways Performance Report, Quarter 3. Thank you, Chris. Thanks for, and Andrew, thank you. This report can be found on pages 51 to 232 of the agenda pack and sets out the performance of the Highways Service for Quarter 3, including the Highways Maintenance Schemes Update and Lincolnshire Highways Performance Report and Highways Complaints Report. And the actions required, the committee is invited to consider and comment on the detail of performance contained in the report and recommend any changes or actions to the Executive Councillor for Highways, Transport and IT. The report will be presented by Jonathan Evans, Head of Highways, Client and Contractual Management Services. So over to you, Jonathan.
Thank you, Chairman, and good morning all. I'll start the report just going through some of the highlights. The performance report is section 1.2. I'd like to start with just a summary of each of the actual contracts and their performance. So the Highway Works term contract, which is operated by Balfour Beatty, this quarter scored 78.6%. That's up from last quarter of 76.6%. The professional services contract, which is operated by WSP, scored 78%. That's up from 74.5% last quarter. The traffic signals term contract, COLAS, scored 86%. That's down from 94% last quarter. I'll run through that in a little bit more detail later in this report. We've got the client measures, which we treat ourselves as a separate party to the alliance or the partnership that we've got with our contractors. We scored 90%. That's positive. That's up from 83% last quarter. And then we've got the overarching partnership ones, the key performance indicators, scoring 83%, which is down slightly from last quarter. The overall scores for Quarter 3 for all contract areas are positive. That's in relation to a time period where we were dealing with Storm Babbitt, and that had an impact on some areas of the service. We've seen some good improvements in relation to street lighting, so there are some successes in there as well. For specific areas of the contract or the service that are below targeted performance, the following improvement plans have been requested. So for Balfour Beatty Living Places, the Highway Works contract, that's Performance Indicator 2, which is response times to emergency works, and COLAS, traffic signals, Performance Indicator 10, that's quotations provided within 3 weeks. In line with the contractual procedures, Performance Indicator 3, Highway Works, is still below the minimum performance level, so has triggered low service damage penalties. Move on now to the contract refresh. At the last quarterly update, I announced that Balfour Beatty Living Places have been offered a 6-year extension from the 31st of March 2026. Over this next phase of, over this next quarter, a number of contract adjustments were proposed and accepted. These improvements are being implemented in advance of April 2024 to ensure that the service continues to deliver the demands of the wider needs of the public. Some of those changes relate to traffic management, improved gang performance, and making sure that the operational control hub that we've installed in Lancaster House is doing what it needs to do. The next update there is WSP is offered a 2-year extension from the 31st of March 2026. We've got continued focus on recruitment and retention of locally based skilled workers. That's a common theme that we've had with that contract, and we're looking to improve that going forward. The traffic signals provider, COLAS, is not extended. That was a decision that we've made and updated on. To date, a project governance structure has been created and initial workshops have been held with the traffic signals team. The traffic signals procurement has now formally commenced with the issue of a prior information notice, and that's to advertise the opportunities of the market. And so this phase now will go into market engagement, making sure that we've got bidders out there that are interested in bidding for this opportunity. Move now on to a specific update, and I'll start with the Highway Works term contract, Balfour Beatty. Just run into some of the challenges and improvements section. So for 23-24, it's anticipated that the Highways Infrastructure Asset Management Strategy objectives to hold the key assets in a steady state whilst implemented an accelerated improvement to the unclassified roads will be achieved. That's in relation to some of the funding levels we've got. For 24-25, so next financial year, the additional 10 million of LCC funds to allocate to drought damaged roads, we are again expecting to meet the objectives of the strategy. It's worth noting that the levels of funding for 24-25 need to be maintained consistently over a prolonged period to see those incremental improvements. That's projected, the sort of timescales that we're looking at there is 10 years. As outlined by Councillor Davis at the start of this meeting, central government have announced 2 pots that will come in for 2025. So that's the central government have announced an 8.3 billion of additional funding for highway maintenance. That's split up in relation to HS2, and a proportion of that will come to Lincolnshire County Council. And as updated by Councillor Davis, the local transport fund is another pot of money, which Lincolnshire potentially has 262 million coming over a 7-year period. So that's really interesting, and we're sort of now just trying to understand how that impacts the service going forward, resourcing up and making sure that we're able to deliver from April 2025. Move on now away from budget update to some of the weather impacts that we've seen in Q3. The highway service dealt with a number of challenging weather events that pulled the service from programmed work to reactive delivery. The impact of storm events of this nature are significant and have continued to disrupt normal service into 2024. During Q3, we had 1,553 emergency jobs were raised. That's more than twice as many when compared to 657 raised in Q3 of 2022. The result of storm events Babbitt, Kieran, Debbie, Ellen, Fergus and Gerrit has meant that the resource normally allocated to programmed cyclical drainage cleansing and tree maintenance has needed diverting to deal with sort of emerging issues. In response to the challenge presented by successive storm events, an additional 1.8 million has been allocated to the highway service for additional drainage resource. I know Richard Fennick is going to outline that in a little bit more detail later on, so I'll park that one there and just give it sort of the positive news in relation to budget. In addition to the 1.8 million, there's an additional 2.5 million that's been awarded or allocated at the executive. That's going to be targeted on carriageway improvement. Move now on to the professional services contract, WSP. The overall scores are 78 out of 100. That's an improvement from Q2 of 74. The main areas of challenges and improvement, what we're seeing at the moment is a pipeline of work for the highway service remains high and aligns with the funding levels allocated to the service. The contractual top-up via the professional services contract enables LCC to reach back into the wider WSP to resource up and meet this demand. The volume of additional work has increased over the past 3 months, with task orders not only being received from highway-related works, but also professional advice for the wider Place Directorate. So that's really positive that that contract's doing what it needs to do. Move now on to the traffic signals term contract. So the contract itself scored 86 out of 100, and that's a significant drop from the quarter previous at 94. This was mainly in relation to the number of quotations for task orders provided within 3 weeks. The score for that actual PI was 2 out of 10, so that's below our minimum level. Within quarter 3, there was an issue with securing traffic management resource within the COLAS business and the wider supply chain, which led to a delay in providing quotations for schemes. This has now been resolved and alternative arrangements are in place, so we're expecting that to come out of that performance score. LCC, through the contract, are pushing a significant amount of work to COLAS in the remaining years of the contract. So there's a significant capital refurbishment programme that's always underway, that's carrying on this year. There's Grantham Town Centre, which will have some traffic signals involved. Western Growth Corridor, there's a halogen lamp conversion to LED. That's just make sure that we're we've got the lamp type that's failing less and we're in a position to maintain them going forward. There's an upgrade to Branston Road Crossroads, and there's 11 new crossings installed as a part of the design and build initiative funding. Move now on to the complaints report. So a copy of the complaints report for quarter 3 can be found in Appendix B. The customer relations team received a total of 218 contacts within quarter 3 of 2023, accounting for less than 1% of all contacts received. Of the 218, 111 entered the formal complaints process. The number of complaints entering the formal process has decreased by 29% this quarter in comparison to the quarter, and has decreased by 26 in comparison to the same quarter last year. So that's really positive data in a time that we were dealing with those storm events. As quarter 3 falls during the winter months, we normally expect for that to start to creep up. I guess it was slightly milder in temperature, but some of those storm events we were expecting to see a little bit more. So again, that's a positive thing. Now I'd like to move on to the NHT Public Satisfaction Survey. This is something I bring to the Scrutiny Committee once per annum, and I'll just run through some of the report and details that we've got. So the report is based on the NHT Public Satisfaction Survey 2023. It can be found in Appendix C. The content of the report gives a general overview of the authority's position in relation to where Lincolnshire highways stand against last year's results. What is obvious from the report, it's what's deemed as important from members of the public that were surveyed, is that condition of the roads is a big priority. Sadly, it's also what the public has least satisfaction with, is the condition of the roads. They also view that the condition of the roads is getting worse, and there is a need to spend more on condition of the roads. From a technical perspective, Lincolnshire's roads have improved for the last 4 years in terms of our scanner, deflectograph, our condition data. So that's something that we need to deal with and make sure we get that communicated out to the public, because that is an improving trend. And that condition data will be brought back in next quarter's update. That's another corporate performance indicator. And I think there's also involved in this is time. It's their marginal improvements on condition data. It's going to take a bit of time when there's a sort of a public perception nationally in relation to funding. In Lincolnshire alone, we're sort of seeing that time scale of an improving condition asset, and maybe that's part of the discussion. So in terms of PI 108, public satisfaction with highways and transport services, we have a measure that didn't meet its target. So LCC's score for 2023 has decreased from the previous year of 46 to 44, showing a slight decrease in public satisfaction. Our target of 52% is based on the average percentage of all other authorities in 2019. It's worth noting that the national average now is 47%, which shows that whilst we are still behind the national average, our score is decreasing at a lesser rate compared to nationally. So I'll just run through that in a little bit more detail. So for 2022, LCC's score was 46%. The average of the 111 authorities was 50%. That meant we had a 4% gap to the national average. This year, even though our score has dropped to 44%, the national average is now 47%. So we've got a 3% gap. So that just shows that whilst it's it's negative news in terms of the performance indicator, that we haven't met our objectives, we are closing the gap and moving up in respect to our other authorities doing similar work. So now I'll move on to the conclusion. The The performance reported for Q3 has seen an improvement in 3 of the 5 main reporting areas. The scores remain in an overall good position and are in line with the improved performance that was seen across year 3. The service continues to pursue further initiatives to tackle areas of low performance and is consistently striving to implement value for money savings. The funding position for 23-24, 24-25 has been positive and will likely result in successful delivery of the Highways Infrastructure Asset Management Strategy goal in relation to asset condition at the next reporting cycle. The committee is asked to consider and comment on the detail of the performance contained within the report and recommend any changes or actions to the Executive Member for Highways, Transport and IT. Thank you, Chairman.
Thank you for the report, Jonathan. And I mean, you mentioned there the efforts of Highways staff through the floods events that we've had, several flood events recently, and I'd just like to thank you on behalf of the committee. I'll thank all the Highway staff, not just Highway staff, but all the other staff within the authority who've been reacting to these flood events, and you know, we do appreciate the efforts that are put in to, towards trying to recover positions following that. It's we do realise it's a lot of extra work, so thank you on behalf of the committee, everyone, for that. Right, have we got any member wishing to speak on that? Councillor Vernon.
Thank you, Chairman. I've got a few points to raise on each of the different reports, but I'll go through them all and then sort of come back if that's okay.
Yeah, please.
Super, thank you. So on the Highways complaints report, I really think that does reflect a good news story. No complaints would obviously be amazing, but I think it's realistic to say that's probably not going to happen. But down to 111 from 151 in the same quarter is really good. It's also really useful to see the results for the same quarter last year rather than the previous quarter, because I think that's more reflective of this current situation. Going on sort of slightly, I'm really sorry because I've just written page numbers. So page 214, the unsatisfactory communication on Fix My Street updates. We have talked about this in this scrutiny meeting, and Fix My Street is brilliant when it works well and is updated, but unfortunately when it's not, it really does cause problems. And a lot of the comments that I receive from parish councils and individuals are about the inaccuracy of information on Fix My Street, saying that things are sort of fixed when they're not, saying that they're being undertaken. So I think if we sort of can look at that, I think you'll probably eliminate a number of complaints from that too. The other points that I'd just like to make, I think having any complaints about staff conduct and attitude is totally unacceptable, and obviously sort of I'd like to hope that these individuals are offered training where appropriate, or sort of further sanctions are taken if necessary. Ultimately they're the sort of front line of the authority, and they're the ones that are sort of representing us when they speak to members of the public. And then finally, going on to the public satisfaction survey, again, I don't dispute that 26.6 return rate is good, but what does concern me slightly is that 50% of the return surveys are from over 65s, and only 10% are from a total of under the age of 44, of which I count myself in that category, so that's fine. But we must engage other, no, not ageist at all, but I'm just telling you my age. But we've got to engage with other demographics to gain a true picture. And as I say, obviously we need the demographics to match, and 50% from over 65s and 10% from a total of under 44s, I don't think is very good. And I don't know how we can go about helping sort of to publicise that. I know that the Let's Talk Lincolnshire has been quite good in sort of engaging a different demographic in different areas, but yeah, I do think that needs to be looked at. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Vernon. Jonathan.
Yeah, I'll work through what them sort of the discussion points in a little bit more detail. In terms of the complaints, yeah, I agree, it's fantastic news for Q3. I do think weather plays a part in it in comparison to previous years, but we're always looking at this data. We're working with the teams to make sure that we improve it going forward, and each of those are investigated in their own right. So every complaint that we get, we're working with across the highway service and with our contractors to make sure that we've got it right and learn from it. So our goal is to see that trend coming down into the future. In terms of Fix My Street, something that we realise during storm events is that sometimes the Fix My Street platform isn't geared up for that day-to-day sort of or automated response that we do. So during something like a Storm Babbitt, where we are dealing with an extreme high amount of inquiries coming through Fix My Street, our automated response doesn't quite hit the mark in terms of its normal timescales and its normal update saying we'll look at this in X days, because that on those events it doesn't tick the box in the need of the public. So we are exploring different ways to tackle that. We're looking at sort of triggering an incident. We have an incident response plan where we go up our levels in terms of a highway service, in terms of resourcing up. What we'd like to do at level 1 or level 2 is change the formatting and the response that goes out through Fix My Street. We're working on that at the moment, almost like a big red button that we'd hit, and it would change the system into sort of an emergency mode. That will hopefully help with the members of the public and get a different tailored response. It can't be bespoke, and it's trying to get that automated response that makes more sense in that event.
Can I just come back on that? Actually, that's a really valid point. And actually, sort of during Storm Babette, one of the things that came up was sort of this is flooding now, and I'm getting a response saying 2 weeks, 3 weeks time, which isn't acceptable. And I was trying to explain to people that it is an automated response, and it's not sort of reflective of somebody looking and going, oh, well, we'll deal with that in 3 weeks. But it may be that sort of even adding a caveat at the bottom to say sort of, yeah, normal response time is, but obviously during different periods, things will be looked at in a different way.
Yeah, thanks for that, Councillor Vernon. Yeah, I agree. It's the quality of the note on the system, I think. That's what I've found to be the problem. If there was just a few more words there of explanation, it would be good. Richard Fenwick just wants to come in there.
Yeah, thank you, Chairman. I just come in, obviously agree with everything that's been said so far. And there is work to do. I think we do always hear of frustrations where unhelpful messages have gone out, be they normally it is that automated, and there's been examples from many members of where a common one that does come up is this is fixed, and clearly it's not. Behind the scenes, that's generally happens when a gang on site has updated their tablet to say they've completed the job that was issued to them. That job might be to go and make something safe, or to go and jet a gully, and they've realised that there's a lot more to do, and they should be saying follow-up works is required, at which point we do have a system in place to go back with a message saying we need to come back to this. It can then, just pressing the wrong button can give that unhelpful information, and this is by no means an excuse, because we do need to get better, and I think that there's more we can do, but just for some context around it, in the last week alone, we received 1,497 reports across the county. We've issued 1,782 jobs out to our contractor that are interacting with those. So I'd like to think that there's never a wrong update, but there is a huge scale out there that do go right, and we need to learn from the ones where the customers had a good experience and make sure we just tighten up on those little things that let people down. And some of it is just around making sure that the automated message that goes out doesn't give the wrong impression to anyone, and that perception can be a really powerful thing, and just learning from those. So I'd say to any members, I know a lot of you do, but when you see things that don't look right, let us know, because we do try and act on those and make changes to make sure it doesn't happen again.
Thank you, Richard. Jonathan, let you continue now.
Thank you, Chairman. The next one was obviously the staff conduct and attitude. That's something that we don't accept. Ultimately, we will clamp down on that, and it's unacceptable if our teams or crews are dealing with members of the public that we find that they haven't done it in the right way. So we jump on that really quickly. Quite often, the ones that in terms of the ones that we've investigated, they're normally a supply chain of a supply chain partner. So it's quite distant to us. But again, it's unacceptable, and we quickly resolve them when those do occur. Final one was the NHT sort of question discussion. Over 65s, the sample that goes out is it's something we've done for the last 15 years. It's our best gauge of public perception, and we can benchmark ourselves against other authorities. I agree that the age profile is an issue. We're not getting a rounded response, but it is randomly selected an issue to 3,300 people. It's just that we're getting a higher percentage of returns from those that are 65 plus. We've got an extra survey that went out this year, was to anybody that wanted to respond. We sent it out to all the parishes. That data should be coming back to us shortly, which might give us a little bit more detail and give us that wider picture of the service. But it's still, in our perception, the best public satisfaction survey, and it allows us to benchmark against other authorities. And whilst it was a lower scoring this financial year, we are moving up against the national average, which is some positive, and it's not trying to spin that in any way for the Highways and Transportation Scrutiny Committee.
Thank you for that, Jonathan. Do you think it's communicating out the improvements that we've got here in road condition and things like that out to the public and getting that message out on a regular basis? Because you know, the condition of the highways is improving according to the information coming through. So how do we get that out to people?
Yeah, we're working with the communications team at Lincolnshire County Council to release those positive messages whenever we can. We've come up with a comms calendar linked to the activities that are happening, and that we feel that works well. So it's giving information, but it's also saying this is a good thing also. I guess there's a line there of how much self-praise you put in yourself, because you want the public to feed back genuinely there. We don't want to manipulate the situation, but for data that is statistically correct, like the condition of the highway is improved for the last 4 or 5 years, our unclassified network, that is a positive thing. It's just from a public perspective, when it's moved from 30% of the network needing maintenance down to 25%, as an individual member of the public, will they notice that difference? Annually, we're probably seeing a 0.75 or 1% improvement on this accelerated improvement funding that we're doing. It's just on an annual basis. They're probably not, a member of the public driving our 9,000 kilometres aren't going to see that. It's the jump that we're likely to make over a 6, 7 year, 10-year period that it will be the change in perception. So I think it does take time. But statistically, where we have the data, I do think we should be putting that out positively and saying it is improving.
Yeah, thank you, Jonathan. Councillor Clark.
Thank you, Chairman. Jonathan, many times I raised at the meeting the issues with Fix My Street, and I completely agree with what Councillor Vernon said on the subject. The issue is, it's so frustrating when you tell people to use Fix My Street and then they come back and say, well, I use it, but they didn't give me a very good answer. They just said when it will get cleaned in a cycle. The people don't know I don't even know when the cycle is. But what I was going to ask you is, under minor work gangs, it mentions tree maintenance. I've been told many times that we haven't got a tree budget. So where does that money come from? Is there a budget for trees? And if there is, can I give you a list of trees I want cutting, please?
Thank you. Over to you, Jonathan.
In relation to tree budget, we do have a budget annually that we allocate. We're probably spending somewhere in the region of 700,000 per annum across the council. We deal with it in a number of ways. So we've got a subcontractor that works for WSP that do our condition surveys. So that's an annual cycle of looking at the trees, making sure that they're safe and fit for purpose. Off the back of that generates trees that are at risk of causing harm. So there's a programmed work that come off the back of that. That's underway and has been for the last 3 or 4 years, typically allocating 100,000 for that individual package of work. The local teams will be raising sort of remedials, make safes all the time. So if there's ever a tree that comes down or a branch or a limb that's falling or is likely to cause harm, our crews will be reacting to that. What we're trying to do more at the moment is move from a reactive response to more planned maintenance. We are doing a number of schemes this summer on some tree-lined streets and trying to tackle it the other way around. We see the benefit of shifting to sort of more efficient service, doing a length of trees rather than shifting it into reactive. So we are spending budget on trees. Whether it's enough, it's probably a tough one to answer when it's got to come at the expense of something else. So I think we're spending the appropriate amount, but we're trying to do it a little bit more efficient and moving them into tree-lined streets. If you want to share those locations where you have concerns, more than happy to take that up offline out of the Housing Transportation the meeting.
Thank you, Jonathan. Richard Fenix just indicated he'd like to come in there.
Yes, thanks, Councillor Clark. Sorry, Jonathan, I just thought I'd come in and add a bit to that. Absolutely, let me know the list. I'd say from a reactive point of view, local highways teams do have to make some decisions about what we respond to and what we don't in terms of trees, because we could always spend a lot more money on trees. As Jonathan explained, if you've been informed that there isn't any budget at all, then that's not correct. I wouldn't say there's a huge budget for tree maintenance, and often where people are saying this tree looks a little bit big, can you come and trim it? We often will leave it. We'll get our arboricultural advice from the environment team to say, does this look okay? Is it healthy? Is there an issue here? Also in Lincoln, parts of Lincoln are covered by a service level agreement with the City of Lincoln Council. So actually in that regard, the budget would sit there for them to do works on our behalf, which is peculiar to Lincoln. But just send me over anything you've got any issues with outside this meeting, and I'll look into it and see if our officers have made the right decision, in my opinion, or not.
Thank you, Richard. Councillor Clark, is that...
May I just indulge in ask one quick question on trees, not related? If a tree then is on a public highway and it collapses into someone's house, whose responsibility is it? Is it the council's or is it the house owners?
Yes, Richard.
The liability would sit with Lincolnshire County Council if it was a tree within the highway.
Thank you for that. Moving on then, I've got Councillor Wright would like to speak.
Thank you, Chairman. If I can start by saying, obviously, we all recognise what the Chairman said about the work during storm periods, but I'd like to talk about some of the more regular work. And if I can, Richard, you said it wasn't excuses, but apparently some people might be pressing wrong buttons. I think we need to move the buttons apart, because my findings so far are there's an awful lot of wrong button pressing. The number of times that residents are told that a job is closed, if that means it's being passed to a team to action, then it should say that rather than them thinking the job's actually being done, because that's happening all the time. It's quite regular that happens. And there's another one now that says a job is more complex, which is, if I can bring Jonathan in, it's about when we talk about the quality of work, the work's being carried out, I'm really struggling to understand how some of the surface dressing work that's been done is actually an improvement. And I'm not saying that sarcastically, I'm saying it because, for instance, outside my property, only months before, we had a gully pot dropped, so the rainwater actually ran towards it. We then improved the surface, and you can guess what I'm going to tell you now, can't you? So now the water now runs away again. In areas, a lot of that surfacing work is actually leaving pooling water. So that's obviously, as we all know, when we get into the winter period, as this morning with nice hard frost where I am, then that means that we know, break that down again. So I just think about the cost of putting it down if it's not actually doing something that it should do. If it's not level, I know it's not going to be a smooth surface everywhere, but I'm seeing an awful lot of pooling water in some of these areas where it's been surfaced. And then not far from me, I mean, this is with the area manager, it's been looked at, but they managed to surface over 3 covers completely and left them covered. And they've been advised already, when we talk about how to choose a crew, I spoke to one of the crews that said if you go knock on a certain door, the gentleman will show you where they are, otherwise you're going to need a metal detector to find them. So this was raised. It doesn't come up as a complaint, because it comes up as an incident on Fix My Street, which means it doesn't make it to the complaints. Subsequently, there was an inspection done, but it has to be handled now apparently more complicated, because the person that drove round in a circle and didn't get out of the cab, unfortunately didn't find the 3 covers that have been surfaced over. So if that's just in the small area that I'm aware of, you know, I've just wondered who's doing the quality checks on this surfacing work, because it's meant to prolong or extend the life of the carriageway, and it's not if it's not going to be put down properly, is it?
Jonathan.
Yeah, apologies, that doesn't sound like we've got it in a number of ways there. We haven't got it right, so we'll take that away and look at it in much more detail. In terms of the surface dressing, you know, it's our preventative maintenance approach that we're doing to prolong the life of an asset, like we would paint a windowsill. It's something that we do to maximise our budget, and it is recommended best practice. In terms of rainwater shedding the right way, you know, the teams that design these sites would be typically going out and doing a level survey or making sure that they runs to the nearest asset. Otherwise, we're just making that asset redundant. So that doesn't make sense in terms of what we're trying to achieve, but we've obviously got it wrong in this instance. So myself, Richard, and the highways team will look into that in a bit more detail. We are trying to look at the use of grips more heavily to make sure we're shedding the water off the highway. Obviously, the storm events of this winter have identified probably a little bit of a backlog in terms of the type of preventative stuff that we could be doing in advance, so that's something that we're looking to do more of. And in terms of surfacing over gullies, it's in absolutely nobody's interest to do that. It's worrying that that's happened, and we need to make sure that that doesn't happen again in the future. So happy to get the actual specifics of those schemes, make sure we learn from it, make sure which delivery partner has done that. In theory, it just shouldn't happen. It shouldn't be an approach that we take, because it will put those properties around it at risk, or the highway at risk of flooding. So, yeah, if it's okay, I'll catch you after this meeting and get those specifics. Thank you.
Thank you for that, Jonathan. And Richard Fenwick would like to come in here. I mean, I think it might be worth saying a word about the quality checking process on these jobs following the completion, and how that is conducted, if you could, please.
Yeah, I'll thank you, Chairman. So initially, to answer the part of the question around the updates you get in, I apologise for the experience you're having, and do let me know specific examples again. We can look into what's happening. You reference a stock response which is sent out at a point where an officer has looked into something, and we used to leave those enquiries open far too long without any update. It is an interim update. That inquiry isn't closed at that stage. The one that you mentioned is to say, this is more complicated, we're going to have to spend longer on it, just to show that there is something progressing, and I would expect there to be further updates on those after that. We were in a position 4 or 5 years ago where there were a huge number of enquiries that had been left for a very long time without any update, a backlog of 8 or 9,000 enquiries across the county. We do try and get officers to give an answer, either link to a job, give an answer to say that we're not going to do anything immediately with this, to give an update so people aren't left hanging. At the moment, we've got 1,065 across the county that are in the local highways world, which are outstanding, which is less than we received in the previous week. Some of those might have been outstanding for 6 months. I'm not saying that they haven't, but that was an endeavour with the comms team to try and get something out to say the reason you haven't heard anything is it's because it's a bit more complicated. So, but I appreciate that can feel like a nothing update, so it's something we'll have to look at. With regards to quality checks, as Jonathan says, it's part of the supply chain. There are spot audits done on the works that we do. The lab do testing on spot samples of all of the work that we do. So where we find that kind of thing, even if someone hasn't informed us, then that would go into what we would classify as a defect under the contract, and we would expect that to be put right at no extra cost, essentially, to us. I'll have to look at the specific example. If it was reported on Fix My Street, it will move between various teams for someone to understand where it is, and normally our process would be to immediately get in touch with our contractor to say, we think this site's been done to a poor standard, we need to put this right immediately. We have supervisors on all sites, but I wouldn't claim that the lab and our teams do quality checks on every single surface dressing site that takes place, because with all of the various jobs that happen across the county, I think it was around 1,000 sites just for the capital schemes over the last year. We're not going to do detailed lab analysis on all of them, but if someone reports something on Fix My Street, then definitely someone should be following it up as well. So hopefully I can give you some assurance that we do checks, and if we haven't followed up correctly, it's because something's gone wrong rather than it's not something we do in the first place. But again, give me those examples. It might be that we do need to talk to an individual because they've not done the right job that they have done, or it could be something that's systemic that we can address quite easily.
Thank you. Okay, Richard. Yep, thank you. Right, have we got any other comments or? Yes, Councillor Ashley Morris.
This is really a brief comment and rather amazing, probably for Fix My Street. One of my residents, and that's Boston West, phoned Fix My Street. The huge pothole outside their house was very swiftly filled. Her complaint is that the people that came to fix it didn't get rid of the yellow paint, and it's unsightly. So if that's the only problem you have, I think that's quite brief. But very well done, on really a job quickly done. But yellow paint apparently is unsightly on the road. Thank you.
Yes, thanks, Councillor Ashley-Morris. Richard, do you want to...
I take that comment in the spirit which it was made, but just for the clarity for the committee, we're not in a position where we would be removing yellow paint. It should fade in time. I appreciate the comment. I think that there's a lot of work for us to do, but I would also agree that from my point of view as an officer, there's an awful lot of success in the thousands that go right. Which no news is good news on those ones, and we just need to make sure the ones that go wrong, we do everything we can to reduce that.
Thank you, Richard. Any more? No. I've just got one that I'd like to ask. It's in the report. It speaks about improvement plans for PI2 and PI10. Are you able to give us a bit more detail on what those improvement plans involve, what's contained in them? Because I take it we've got an improvement plan, but it would be nice to know what the issues are and what actions are being taken to clear those up. If you could, please. Thanks, Jonathan.
No problem, Chairman. In relation to PI2, which is the one operated by Balfour Beatty Highway Works contract, that's response times to emergency works. The scope of the contract calls for when it dips below a minimum performance level, so in this case it did, we let it go for 1 quarter, and then we request an improvement plan straight away, and then we monitor it for another quarter. The improvement plan is pretty much an investigation, so it's exactly what we're talking about here on a local level, but more on the sort of a wider perspective. So for emergency work, it will be looking at the volume of inquiries received in the quarter, the amount of resource that Balfour Beatty have got allocated to it. It could be that it could be something that's trying to identify the theme generally of what the cause is. For PI2, for quarter 3, it was resource. So with the Storm Babbitt event, during the event, we allowed Balfour Beatty to have a sort of a window of not capturing the performance, but both sides of the event as the rainfall built up, and then the following days after, the amount of dedicated resource wasn't where we needed it to be. And I think that's just the volume of inquiries and data received. It's could they have been expected to resource up in advance? What we've done is now every time we get a yellow weather event, we'll be having a conversation with Balfour Beatty earlier in the week. We get quite a lot of them through the year, so it's picking which ones we think are going to be a significant rainfall event, making sure that we've got the right resource on standby, so we have a sandbag gang or we have additional crews brought into the county, and it's having that dialogue up front saying, how does this feel, how are we prepped, are we ready? So that will be the outcome of that improvement plan, and that additional resource then will help us in quarters 4 and into the new year. For COLAS, the traffic signals performance indicator 10, that was the one, the quotations within 3 weeks. So within the report, I outlined just a bit of detail about why that failure occurred. It was because Balfour Beatty, COLAS traffic management is historically based in Grantham. That resource now, due to their national needs, has moved up to Birmingham. So it was a COLAS decision nationally has impacted the Lincolnshire contract. And for quarter 3, when that move happened, they hadn't identified a replacement traffic management operator. So COLAS are now using the supply chain partner that Balfour Beatty use in Lincolnshire, out of a depot that's just based south of Lincoln, and that has resolved that situation. So the improvement plan would say, why did it happen, how to stop it in the future, timescales for it improving, and in this case it will be fixed quickly. But they're lengthy reports that we can always share, but they're going on all the time in the background in terms of performance management. Hopefully that's dealt with that query.
Yes, thank you. It has. Thank you, Jonathan. Thanks for that. Right, I'm going to move on then to the recommendation and proposals. And I'm going to move that the report be received by this committee and that our satisfaction be recorded on the performance achieved in Q3, as well as the assurances received in relation to challenges faced by the service. And also I'm going to ask that the comments raised by this committee be shared with the Executive Councillor for his consideration by the relevant officers, and those comments would certainly the welcoming, the good, the improvement in the complaints report, but also highlighting the Fix My Street issues and looking for improvements there in the way those jobs are signed off or the actions are signed off, because it is generating a lot of queries for members from the public, and you know, it could save a lot of work if that was those notes were appropriate and informative enough. Yeah, the tree management, I think we've sorted that out, that you're going to get a list of trees from Councillor Clark that he would like some action on. So I'm asking that those comments are raised by this committee be shared with the Executive Councillor for his consideration by relevant officers. So does anyone dissent from that proposal? No? Well, that's carried then, so we'll move on. So the next is the Highways Major Projects Update Report. And this scrutiny report is found on pages 233 to 242 of the agenda pack. The report outlines progress concerning major projects, and our actions are: the committee is invited to consider and comment on the detail concerning the progress of major projects that is contained in the report, and recommend any changes or actions to the Executive Councillor for Highways, Transport and IT. And Sam Edwards is going to present this report. So over to you, Sam.
Thank you, Chairman. Okay, so it's been crazy, but it's been 3 months since my last report on a number of these projects, and we have seen progress, which is always good. So I'll go through each scheme and I'll refer to the page in the pack, because it's easier to refer to the pictures to explain it, so I try to put in more pictures than words. So if we start on page 233, so that's Grantham Southern Relief Road. So since the last period, and actually this is, when I do these reports, this is about 6 to 8 weeks past from now, and actually that bridge, the first section of that bridge has progressed significantly since then. I wanted to put these pictures in specifically just to really highlight the size of this bridge. I've explained previously about how we're going to launch this bridge out over the Witham Valley, over the East Coast Main Line. But if we look down to the bottom of page 234, the size of these beams. So that's a transit van next to the beams, to give you an idea of scale. So these are nearly 3 meters high, the beams. So, you know, your size of your normal house, and then another ½ meter on top of that, and then a little bit more as well. These are significant size beams that are being launched. And again, just to get the scale on the top of page 234, that's the bridge. You can see the bridge in the distance on the west side, and the piers sticking out that it will launch across. There's 2 launches which are the furthest. They're a 70-meter span between the piers. So you are effectively launching these beams with the deck already constructed, and at worst case 69 meters on a cantilever till it lands on the other side. The reason I say that is not to worry anyone, because there's a lot of people involved in this and has been for many years in the launch process. But really say this is not normal day-to-day civil engineering. This is national based basically. These are it's going to be the largest structure in the county by some way once it's constructed. At the moment we were looking towards the end of March. We're probably pushing into sort of mid-April before we start the launch process. Just finalise some elements, getting the jack and loads in places and things like that. And there's some elements around wind that we're just confirming at the moment. In addition, rather than waiting the bridges in and then building the eastern side, we're actually building the eastern side in tandem, because the launch process takes about 6 months in total, because you build a bit, push a bit, build a bit, push a bit as it goes through. So it's an extended period of time, And if anybody does want to come down, I'm afraid it's not going to be at breakneck speed. It is sort of millimetres an hour kind of thing, so you won't see it being launched particularly quickly, but we will at the time have things like time-lapse videos so we can see that kind of operation. So pushing forward to North Icon Relief Road, not a huge update in the period. Last period I said we submitted the planning application. That's still the case. I forget the exact terminology, but the comment stage has now ceased. We've received all those and working through. There's 3 or 4 items, not necessarily objections, but concerns that we're working through. We're all but there with most of those concerns, and we're targeting to go to planning and regs in May. But there are some things, and we can't confirm that until we're at the point where we've resolved the concerns. But we're targeting May, possibly June as a fallback, but we really want to be hitting May. In the period as well, we're also following the last Scrutiny committee about the pre-decision paper to prepare the orders. That was agreed by the executive, and we're cracking on with preparing those orders. So we're written out for the Section 16 notices to all the landowners and the statutory requirements. And then, should we secure planning in May, ideally, we would then come back to this committee as a pre-decision paper to seek approval from the executive to publish those legal orders, and that effectively initiates the compulsory purchase order and the side res order, which is the next phase of the project. Moving down to Spalding Western Relief Road on page 235. Again, things have progressed significantly since these pictures. So what you can see there is it's another bridge, but the deck's now been poured, which is great. And at the second picture, at the bottom of page 235, just to remind people of the construction methodology. So there are 800 piles underneath each of the embankment, nothing to do with the bridge. That's just to stabilise the embankment because of the poor ground conditions. We've then got a vertical retaining wall, and that's what that's what the chaps on the right-hand side are building. So this is a vertical retaining wall that's effectively, you've got mesh that rolls out into the different layers of your fill, which holds it in place. Best way it's described to me was as a kid at the beach, and you build a sandcastle, you put tissue paper between it, you can actually stand on it and it holds your weight. It's the same principle. But because of the reason for that vertical is to take away the area imprint of all that fill material pushing down on the ground. The third area that we've used to limit the amount of weight is the fill that's going in for the embankment is sort of darker material. I think I mentioned previously about what this lightweight material we used is Leica. It's like a pumice stone almost that goes in. So that's what they're laying in that. And I'm happy to say I've seen the pictures at the end of last week that's almost up to level of the deck now, which is great. So progress is going well. And the 2 pictures on page 236, this is actually elsewhere. We focus very much on the bridge, but actually the scheme of section 5 goes a lot further than the bridge on the picture at the bottom of 236. This is the junction that would facilitate what's known as, from a road perspective, section 4, but the huge amount of housing that it unlocks on that side as well. So it does go further than just the bridge in the distance and the roundabout that we've already constructed at Enterprise Way. Moving on to some levelling up fund projects. We've now, this is really just to formally say, we've completed the Marsh Lane works that was at Boston, that was done in conjunction with the Boston Active Travel. And really just to say that in addition to what I reported last period with the Dolphin Lane scheme being constructed at Boston, we're working on submitting both those projects for the East Midland Merit Awards, and we will hopefully feedback in due course of whether that's successful or not. Moving down to Springfield Road Roundabout, works continued on the northeast and southwest quadrant. It's dried up a little bit, but that continues to cause us issues as the wet weather that we've had through there. But actually speaking, middle of last week to the teams, they're gearing up for switching quadrants now as they're starting to surface those areas. So they'll be definitely moving into from the southwest to the southeast, and potentially a little bit later going from the northeast to the northwest. One of the areas I would just highlight is at the top of page 238. That running right through, most people wouldn't know, but running right through the middle of that roundabout is what's called the Laws Drain. So it's running, as you can see in the picture, of north-south. You've actually got an exposed ditch, and quite a significant ditch that takes a lot of drainage right through the middle of a roundabout. it's not necessarily what I would design if you had a blank sheet, but it's caused us quite a lot of difficulty, as I say, around the wet weather and incorporating that ditch at the same time as building the works. So just to highlight something that you may not have been aware of previously. Moving on to Green Cell Roundabout, the design is complete. We're out to tender now, and not really a lot to update other than that we get the tenders back on the 15th of March, and we shall see the types of pricing that we get and the approach. Difficult to fully determine traffic management until we get the prices back, but it's most likely going to be similar to Springfield, where rather than having traffic lights, we have narrowed lane widths. And there's probably going to be a period of a closure on the 1180, so that's the road going into Spalding, not for the whole scheme, but for a period of time for some utility diversions which are unavoidable, and also to facilitate the works in those areas so we can get in and get the works done and move out. We've made it very clear, as we have with Springfield, that yeah, we're doing works on the A16 at two very, very busy junctions, and they may cause disruptions. What I would say is the fear of the disruptions at Springfield Roundabout, the reality has been a lot less than what the fear was, and it's actually flowed relatively well. So we see no reason why green cells shouldn't operate in the same way, but we can always change plans and mitigate as we go through. I'm going to gloss over Grantham Future High Street Fund as I've presented the report earlier. Moving on to Sinsel Bank, this is another scheme being done in conjunction with the District Council, this one with the City of Lincoln. Again, not a huge amount to update other than that the detailed design continues. We're also gone through the traffic regulatory orders to allow the one-way system. The statutory engagement process is now complete, and we're soon to be, or near complete, and we're soon to be moving on to the non-statutory engagement processes. We have some concerns about one-way systems and vehicles accessing the football stadium, but we're working with those parties to try and resolve that in conjunction with the city and the town's board. And then a couple of schemes that I've not mentioned previously. These are new projects we're looking into. The first one is Netland Road Roundabout. This is, best way to describe it is doing a similar thing to what we did at Rhizome Road Roundabout in 2019-2020. So increasing the size of the roundabout, increasing the number of lanes entering and exiting, and building greater capacity within that roundabout. The difference between this and Rhizome is we are looking to incorporate a grade separated footway and cycle bridge on the east side, as you can see in the little picture, where the ground already naturally rises up. That will require planning permission, so the roundabout improvements itself don't, but the footbridge does, and it will require land acquisition. The land acquisition we're trying to do through agreement rather than going through CPO. We've met with all the landowners, and in principle they're quite comfortable. What I would stress is there is a lot of complexity in regards to the land to the southeast with regards to planning. It has open space designation within the planning application, so we're talking with the landowner and the development that's there about dedicating the land to highway rather than purchase and working with open space. So not a lot more I can update at this point other than that we're going through those early processes to make sure that there is a deliverable scheme there within the footbridge. But I want to stress it's not a case of this could be quite a complex process to go through. It's not as easy as just putting a footbridge in. And then moving on to the two distinct separate schemes, but they are geographically close. One is the coastal carriageway. So this is it's off the main networks, but it's the one that's used to access car parks like Anderby Creek and so forth, and others. And this stretches from Sandylands to Chapel St Leonard's. It's in a very poor state, and those using it are discouraged from doing so. So we are looking later this year, after the summer embargo in September, to improve that, to reconstruct the road and improve it. Connected, but as I say, a separate scheme is the Coastal Footway Cycleway, is actually trying to improve some sections and create in other sections, so you have a complete extension from Mablethorpe all the way down from Sandylands to Chapel St Leonard's. So you have a footway cycleway down there, the whole route, which would be fantastic for the tourism economy in the area. And it also links to the coastal carriageway, because we don't necessarily want cyclists and walkers that currently go down there having a safe space to go down. Again, to stress, that will definitely need planning, land acquisition, and a lot of ecological, environmental protection measures. So we're having those early discussions with the Environment Agency now, to make sure that there is actually a deliverable scheme, so we're not going too far down a rabbit hole if there's something that's completely blocking this. And I think I'll probably pause there. That's the end of the report, but if there's any questions, I'll take those.
Thank you for the report, Sam. Thank you for that. I've got Councillor Rawlins would like to come in. Over to you, Sue.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Thank you, Sam. It's very interesting. Just on the Netlham Road roundabout, you did indicate in the report that it may be a possibility to start the roundabout in advance of securing the planning permission for the cycleway improvements. If you weren't successful with the cycleway improvements, is it likely you could proceed with the roundabout in any event?
Over to you, Sam. Thanks.
I think that's a question I would have to take back to Councillor Richard Davies as the portfolio holder, is whether this is as attractive as a highway flow scheme without the footway cycleway, because there could be arguments to say that increasing the flow makes it less safe for those to cross. But there's other ways. We could look at putting traffic signals across there on a user basis. That does unfortunately defeat the purpose of the scheme, because it brings in restrictions to the flow. Ultimately, there is an ideal scenario, and that's what we're working towards. But I think it's too soon to be black and white is yes or no at this stage.
Thank you for that, Sam. Councillor Strangill, Eddie.
Thank you, Chairman. First of all, my apologies. I had to pop out for the meeting with the leader through Jonathan's item, so apologies, Jonathan, for that. Netlham Road roundabout, very encouraged that you're going to do something similar to the Rhizome roundabout. That's very encouraging. But my question is, and I know you can't answer it, but I'm going to ask it anyway. The one thing that disappoints us with the Lincoln Relief Road, the ring road, if we can call it that, which it will be one day, I'm sure, is that it runs from dual carriageway into single carriageway, into dual carriageway, into single carriageway. And that bit of road between the Rhizome and the Netlham roundabouts is just a nightmare, especially in the summer months when everybody's heading to Skeggy for their break, etc. Is there anything, I'm not absolutely sure whether that part is actually national highways or whether it is county council, and is there ever going to be a change where we can see a dual carriageway running round Lincoln? Thank you, Chairman.
Thank you, Eddie. Over to you, Sam.
Well, first of all, as a resident of Lincoln, I would agree. It would be wonderful for it all to be dual carriageway, and I think that's the long-term aspiration. I can only speak so much for those that's on the National Highway Network, and that is the section from Pennell's roundabout through to Carlholme Road roundabout. Everything north of that is the county council. With regards to, and I could get a bit boring here, but as far as capacity in the highway world, there's link capacity and there's node capacity, and it depends on which one's causing the issue. What's at this particular area on the northern bypass, it's node capacity, so that's your junction that's causing the issues. It's not necessarily that it needs to be dual carriageway between it. However, there is a point where link capacity does become an issue, and it will obviously be in the future. So although we're looking to progress this scheme, what we are presenting to the executive portfolio is a future plan, a pipeliner plan, particularly as Councillor Richard Davies opened with comments about a potential 262 million coming from the local transport fund and any other funding for the future, is looking there for potentially Ragby Road roundabout. So that's the next roundabout on where it links to the LEB, and potentially linking dual carriageways between Rhizome Road and Netlham and Rhizome, so you complete that section. Now, clearly, that's very much funding dependent on that, and it's not necessarily needed immediately because of the node capacity is the issue, not necessarily the link. But again, to stress what we did at Rhizome Road roundabout, what we intended at Netlham, is that the construction is future-proofed for allowing a dual carriageway. For example, the footbridge we will put in, we wouldn't put it in to span the road as it is now. We would put in, as we did with the Eastern Bypass, so that it spanned forward dual carriageway should one come along.
Thank you, Sam. Right, Councillor Ashton.
Thank you very much. Just picking up on the Green Hill roundabout project. I'm a little bit disturbed to read on page 238. However, it is likely to include a period of closure on the B1180 side road. I can't help feeling that that reads something like a euphemism. The B1180 isn't just a side road. The B1180 is the main access to the entire principal industrial estate in Spalding. It's Warden Tree Lane, it's Westmarsh Road, it's Enterprise Way. It is, I'm sure we've got the traffic movement data on that road somewhere, but I'd hazard a guess it's at least 50% of the HGV movements in Spalding. If that road isn't able to access the roundabout that we're rebuilding, then every single one of those HGV movements is going to have to be rerouted via Spalding Road, either if they're going Enterprise Way on the nice new roundabout we've built, or if they're sticking to the B1180, the traffic light junction at the end. All of those HGV movements are going to be directed towards either the centre of Spalding, if they're heading south, or through Surfleet and Pinchbeck heading north, appreciating the width of the old bridge over the River Glen at Surfleet. Could I ask what assessment has taken place as to the likely impacts of that closure on the settlements of Surfleet and Pinchbeck, on the old bridge, and which is quite narrow over the River Glen, on the centre of Spalding? How many days are we anticipating this closure to last? And again, from our, I'm assuming we have done assessments of the traffic movement that currently use that side road. What are we suggesting the impact is going to be? Because I can see it being absolute bedlam, and from a casual reading of our report at 5.3, we're just referring to this as a side road, and as if it's any side road. It's not any side road. It's most of the HGVs in Spalding.
Thank you, Councillor Ashton. Some good points there. Sam?
Okay, so the side roads or the minor major route, that's a highway colloquialism we tend to treat as the major and the minor axes. So that's not meant in a narrative sort of way. That's meant in how we speak, I'm afraid. So that's my own in how I've written it. But there's no suggestion that this is an unclassified road that has no importance. There's no suggestion there. It does say likely period of closure, and to answer some of the questions, if we do need to close it, it could be up to a period of 8 weeks, which is significant. However, there are opportunities looking into whether there can be one-way closures in each direction. It's very difficult until until the procurement stage is over with the contract to understand their working restrictions and things like that, which is why we have a fairly well thought out mobilisation plan that goes through there as well, so we can work through these. What I would stress is none of this is done in isolation. These are discussions with the local members, so they are aware of this element. We've also been talking with Freight Association throughout this, and with the permitting team about all the works taking place and diversion routes. So it's again, I know I keep saying this, but it's not black and white. There is an element of grey in there about what we do, but we're waiting for more information. But what I will stress to this committee is we are not blind to the fact that that is not an unclassified small road. That is a major access road, and we would need to and would engage with the businesses and freight haulers that use it, and seek alternative. The alternative roads that you mentioned, we have explored those with the permitting team, and we're happy from a practicality of width and capacity of bridge and weight limits and things like that it can be. But again, I will stress with no shame that we are doing major works to a major roundabout, and the purpose of doing that is because it does have a lot of traffic and it's under capacity, and there will be a stage when it will cause disruption, and we won't shy away from that, but what we will do is mitigate it and limit it where we can.
Thank you, Sam. Councillor Ashton, did you want to comment? Okay. Any other? Councillor Clark.
Thank you, Chair. I'm glad to see that there's a cycle path from Kirkby Street to Portland Street in the Central Bank development. My issue is, you know, we often hear that cycle paths are being, you know, promoted and that for employment, etc. But when you come to Lincoln, there's not much of a cycle path. I mean, you've got a cycle path here. For my division, down Scallingthorpe Road, there's a path that's a shared path that's in a bad condition, really bad for cycling to use in certain areas. Then you come into Bootham, you know, from the Bootham Park Road area, there's no cycle path. But yet you've got a cycle path here in the middle of the town. So is there ever going to be any coordination to actually get a proper cycle path in the major city?
Thank you, Councillor Clark. Sam, have you got any information on that?
So what I think has been publicised here previously is we have the LC WIP, so the local cycling and walking improvement plan, that looks at areas like this. This is also linked in with the Lincoln transport strategy in providing those. As far as Lincoln up, it is very much sometimes funding dependent on what becomes available. What I would stress is we're probably not going to resolve it here, but we can certainly take any comments away about where we may want to improve in the future. And it's probably also a good place as the Lincoln Transport Board, which I'll come on to on the next paper, is a good place to sort of identify concerns into your executive portfolio holder.
Yeah, okay. Thank you, Sam. Councillor Strangle, I believe you want to...
Very briefly, Chairman, I agree with Councillor Clark 100% regarding the cycleways, especially Skellington Road, which is a dangerous way to cycle because there's a very thin white line along the side of the actual footpath which allows cyclists to go on the footpath, and then you've got problems with pedestrians coming the other way, and sometimes the pedestrian have to step out onto the main road. So fully concur with Councillor Clark's comments. Thank you.
Thank you, Eddie. I think we can bring that up in the item on transport strategies, etc. Right, I'm going to move on now to the next, to the end of this, and I'm going to move that report be received by this committee and that our satisfaction be recorded on the progress achieved to date on the progression of major projects, and I ask that comments raised by this committee be shared with the Executive Councillor for his consideration by relevant officers. Does anyone dissent? No? Well, that's carried then. So we'll move on to the next item on the agenda. So, and this is the annual update on the approach to transport strategy development. And this scrutiny report is found on pages 243 to 250 of the agenda pack. The report highlights the progress made in implementing the transport strategy since the endorsement of a more robust approach by this committee in June 2018. The report outlines the annual update on progress against planned activities and explores further developments over the past year. It emphasises the holistic nature of the transport strategy, extending beyond motorised vehicles and roads. Additionally, the document revisits the background of the transport strategy approach and its integration with the local transport plan. And we're asked as a committee, are invited to comment on the actions taken to date and the planned development for future years. And Sam Edwards is taking this report. Over to you, Sam.
Thank you, Chairman. And I'll start I think, reiterating your opening words that this is quite a packed agenda and treat it as read. So I'm going to treat the first half of this as, because it's similar to what I presented previously, as the update of what a transport strategy is, what a traffic order is, and the benefits of it. And move into more of the updates over the last period, unless there's any questions later. So, just to reiterate again on what we talked about before, each of these transport boards in the 8 key urban areas, but we do have one for Louth, but without a transport strategy. They all have transport boards, and I think it's fairly unanimous that I've had back is that these transport boards have been very well received at both the district, county, officer and member level. and a number of those here today sit on a number of those boards. They're either chaired by Councillor Richard Davies or Councillor Cleo Perrotton-Williams. So they do have a highway and transport focus, as you'd expect, and it also has members from the local membership as well. A number of updates are given, not only about the transport strategies and developments taken forward, but for example, as I've raised in there, sort of major highway works, residence parking schemes, for example, new junctions, additional cycle lanes, public transport concerns, local plans, so everything sort of evolved around it, and they do flex and to what's needed for that specific area. What I will stress, as we have a number of times, it is not a formal decision-making process. It has no formal powers, but it is a good place to have those kind of joined-up discussions. As far as progress over the last period, we've almost finished the new Lincoln traffic model. It's there, can be used in anger now, but it just needs to final LMVR reports completing, but that's almost complete now. And we're also almost complete with the Stanford Transport Strategy, which we'll bring into this committee, I think it's May from memory. So that's what we've been doing over the last period. Just to stress the Lincoln traffic model, we've updated that specifically, not only did it need doing, but to align within the programme for the final business case and the legal orders for the North Icon Relief Road. So the existing model was used for the planning application, which is perfectly fine. But in order for the final business case in mid-25, the DFT would expect a new model considering the life of the existing model. So that's what we've done. And we're currently retesting all the modelling that we've done up to date against the new model. But we expect it to come out broadly the same. Future programme, just to touch on this, last period we said we were going to do this coming year, 24-25, we were going to do an update or a new model for the Spalding traffic model. We've proposed to switch things around, so we were going to do the Spalding traffic model and then the Gainsborough traffic model, just because of the life of it. We switched those around for two reasons. One is we didn't see the advantage of taking traffic data from Spalding when you've got exactly the schemes we've just talked about, the Western Relief Road, Greensill, Springfield, other things taking place at the same time that would, although not insurmountable, there's formulas you can put in place to balance it, but it's not ideal. In addition, there's discussions about the West Burton Fusion Power Station just outside of Lincolnshire, but would have a significant impact as traffic, particularly if a planning application comes forward for Gainsborough. So to have more up-to-date data will put Lincolnshire in a much better position to understand the impact from that scheme. So that's why those two have been switched around to give the best data for going forward. I've included 7.3 on page 247, just an update of the plan of what we've done today and what we plan for the future years. And what I thought I'd include on this one is I come along to these every year and talk about the transport strategies, but they're wonderful, but we're interested in output. You know, what have we got from this? So I've put in item 8.1, just an example, not exhaustive, an example of the types of schemes that have secured money. Predominantly, we will most likely not have secured money for these projects should we not have had the evidence background to prove why these improvements are needed, nor through the transport strategy, the political and local buy-in and understanding that these schemes are needed. So they act as an absolute key foundation for putting funding bids in, of which nearly all these schemes we've been successful with securing external funding for. So I won't list all of them, but I think it just gives a feel that there's value to these. In addition, we've also used the transport strategies along with the route action plan, which was looking at the main roads across Lincolnshire that connect the urban environments. We've been creating a long list of projects, and we are talking long, 300 odd potential projects. All of them are concepts, not necessarily providing the benefits. We'd need to take those further to understand the cost, the risks, the benefits, things like that. But it puts us in a fantastic place for example, securing 106. Should that come along, that we can present it, but also should a funding bid come along, like Councillor Richard Davies opened this meeting about, we can be ahead of the game, that we've got the grounding for that. So it's a really good place to be. And then just finally, I was talking with my transport colleagues, and just to give a bit, it's not just about road improvements and that side of thing and safety improvements. A number of these documents, including the transport strategy, have been incorporated in things like the BSIP application and the improvement plan that came forward for sustainable transport patterns as well. So it is sort of wider reaching, but I will probably pause there considering time available and whether there's any questions.
Thank you for that, Sam. Thank you for the report. Have we any questions or contributions about this? No? Nobody? Councillor Clark.
Yeah, sorry about this, Chair. It's just repeating what I said last time. It seems that whatever plans there is, the cycle path within Lincoln must have been left out.
Well, yes, we at this point in time, I think we could take a note to for Sam to take these away for the next Lincoln Transport Board meeting. Is that okay? So they will be brought at the Lincoln Transport Board and considered there. So if you could let Sam have a list there of what you were proposing or what you were asking for. Is that okay? Thank you. Okay. Have we any other comments? No. I've just got one quick one, I think. That on the completed projects, such as Lincoln Eastern Bypass and the Grantham Southern Relief Road, which is going towards completion, how do we do a post-implementation evaluation of these projects, how they've gone and the benefits that they've given? Do we check that they're doing what we put them in place for?
So most funding bids, and I would say most, they all have their own rules and guidance around them, but most of them have a requirement for what's called M&E, so monitoring and evaluation data. If you look at something like the Lincoln Eastern Bypass, it's a very clear one in the 5 Green Book cases that you provide 1, 3 and 5 year post construction data on what's been performed, and that's not just from a traffic flow but a wider benefits. A number of those other schemes have probably the best way to put it is slightly dialed down versions of those, depending on what bid. There's a number there from Homes England, D-Look, the LEP. There's lots of different fundings from different pots, and they all have certain requirements. So usually within the bid, it does that. There are occasional where there's a number of schemes where it doesn't require that. That doesn't necessarily mean we don't monitor it, because we monitor the traffic volumes for those areas anyway. But there tends to be on a ad hoc basis, as and when required, if it's chosen to prove thing. But those schemes that are generally more impactful, as far as like a rise and rail roundabout as an example, we are required to do monitoring evaluation data to respond on that.
Yeah, just to follow up, have you got any examples of our lessons learnt from those previous completed projects are taken forward onto the ones that are coming forward? That'd be interesting to know.
So again, within the monitoring and evaluation, they usually require depending on the scale, a lessons learned exercise to have taken place and to put in. That's not say a bid, but the whole project about how it's gone. We do those, we submit it, and in addition, we also collate a number of those onto, want of a better word, a system, so that we can refer to these in future, so that they, as I say to my staff, it's not lessons learned, it's lessons to be learnt. There's no point in doing an exercise that you put on the system and never look at. They have to be learnt on what's taking place.
Thank you for that, Sam. Right, no one else indicating, so I'm going to move on, and I'm going to move that the committee endorse this report and that our satisfaction be recorded on actions taken to date, as well as future activities planned. Does anyone dissent? So indicate? No? Right, that's carried then. So we'll move on to the next item on the agenda, which is the highways, gully cleaning, drainage repair schemes and surface water flooding report. And this scrutiny report is found on pages 251 to 254 of the agenda pack. The report sets out the reactive, cyclic and planned aspects of highway drainage maintenance, including low-level flooding response. Committee is asked to consider and comment on the detail contained in the update and recommend any changes or actions. I've got Richard Fenwick here, County Highways Manager, and he's with us to present this report. So over to you, Richard.
Thank you, Chairman. It's a short report, so I will go through some of the detail contained within, because as you'd expect, there's some quite big numbers within this. The report's sort of set out in a tiered phase, so starting with cyclic maintenance. The number at the time this report was written, which would be a couple of weeks ago, so it will have moved on since with the scale we're talking about, was around 118,000 gullies cleaned on cycle. So that is where the tanker will go and suck the debris and silt out of the pot itself, which is done on a targeted approach every year, as it always has been. That is on target to be complete everything that was assumed to be done by the end of March, so we're coming to the end of the financial year. There are audits taken on those where we will effectively check. The 91% compliance rate has been celebrated as a success in the past. However, we are looking at that with our subcontractors and trying to get that higher, really, to make sure that there aren't some of the various issues that can come up are issues with jammed lids, etc. Issues where we believe one might even have been missed. So we do look at that, and we're currently exploring more ways to get more assurance. And I'm not sure we'd ever be at 100%, but it's good to aim high. That moves us into the reactive maintenance world, which is where a lot of the noise is at the moment. There's a typo in the report, so I apologise for that, but there are currently 767 at the time of pulling this report a week or so ago, off-programme jetting jobs. That's either in progress or pending. That will be where a tanker with a high-pressure jetter will go and clear the lines between the gullies, the pipework itself, if there's blockages or issues there. 453 of that 767 were issued by our local highways teams since Storm Babette. So you can see the large volume of work there, and just for some context, we completed 854 of those types of works in the last 12 months prior to the report being written. There's 157 drainage investigation jobs, which are slightly larger jobs where we carry out CCTV surveys of systems, find if there's maybe roots within a system, tree roots, we can do some root cutting, some small localised pipe replacement or lining. And in the last 12 months, we had AJET is a subcontractor that does the vast majority of those works through the Balfour BT term maintenance contract. We completed 245 of those, so they tend to be location based. It's not one gully; it's an issue, a drainage issue that's causing problems. The hierarchy of our response and our triaging of all of those kind of reactive works is ultimately where there's been any internal flooding of property or any risks to life. Obviously they are at the top of the list, which is continuously reshuffled if new ones come in to make sure. Unfortunately, some of the more minor issues do get put back and can take a while to get round to, but we're always trying to prioritise the most serious ones. We would then move on to external gardens flooding, then onto the level of full roads being flooded across or footpaths being affected. Ultimately, the last issues are where there is an issue, but it's standing water within the carriageway, which is pooling, but it's more of a nuisance than any kind of serious issue. Whilst it's still important, it's not going to be prioritised ahead of things that are affecting people and flooding sites. Jonathan mentioned the additional funding that's been agreed to come in, which is fantastic news. Just to give an outline of where the reactive spend is coming from on that is to bring in effectively double that resource, which will more than half the wait time on some of these as we go into the next year, and some of those resources are already starting to come in place in the last few weeks. So it would mean that rather than having 2 off-programme jetters, which is what we've traditionally always had, we'd have 2 gully tanker jetting units, one what we call a van pack, which is a smaller unit that can get into harder to reach very narrow streets or footways that are affected where a normal tanker just can't fit down. And then one of what is called a killer whale, that's K-I-L-O, whale, rather than like the actual whale, which is a huge machine, but with really high power jetting to do some of the really serious work. Flowline, our subcontractor, are providing those, and we're looking at just trying to address what the common issues are, where we've maybe not been able to finish things in one visit in the past, and we'll end up with those frustrations of the problem isn't really fixed and it requires more work. We're pairing those with additional civils gangs for dig down work, so that is to address the fact that in the past often those off-programme jetting jobs come back with more questions than answers, which is unfortunately what drainage tends to be. So they will report back that there's maybe a collapsed pipe, there's an issue with an outfall, assets need replacing or root cutting, some lining might need to take place. That normally feeds back to the local highways team to then issue another job for that civils work to happen, which then needs to be programmed around priorities. To pair them together, whilst there might be some inefficiency on site while one gang is investigating and another gang's ready to do work, we're looking at ways to minimise that by picking other things up in the area at the time. It just means that we'll have both there on the first visit, and it will allow us to do a first time fix many more times rather than have to feed it back into a system to come back under another traffic management. So that resource, that civils resource, when it's not supporting that work, will also then be supporting the investigation of our capital schemes going forward to try and be more joined up. And we, on a previous report, I've explained how I've realigned my teams internally to bring everything in together under, so the cyclic works are delivered through the same team as those doing the minor schemes. That kind of feeds up through priority into our major capital schemes. Talking of minor drainage schemes, Nathan, who actually wrote this report, has given a list of some of the schemes that were completed in 2023-24. We've got around 25 minor drainage schemes, so they're in the range of value of about 20 to 50,000 pound schemes, where it's obviously not a few little bits of pipes. It can be putting new, larger pipes in, additional gullies, checking out to outfalls, getting a better outfall. Sometimes it's where our systems actually connect into an Anglian water sewer, and the strain on that means that it's worth investing in finding another outfall directly into a watercourse. It's that kind of thing. So we've got a list of around 25 of those for this year, and we've built a list for the year after. And Nathan's indicated that we're trying to be a year ahead of ourselves to do the pre-investigatory works on those the year before the actual capital scheme starts. The issue with drainage is you can plan as much as you like, but often until you dig the road or the ground up, you don't really know what you're going to find. So rather than find a problem and have to have a rethink, we're trying to do as much investigation beforehand softly to inform the position. And there's just a note there around we're trying to join all these resources up, so the additional jetters and the dig down, as we call them, civils crews that are supporting the reactive works. If there's any gaps in those programs where they're not needed to follow a gang round, they will be supporting the pre-planning of the capital works to feed up, to make sure we've got the most efficient use of that extra money. But overall, there is an awful lot of work out there at the moment. The storms have certainly generated a waiting list, which will be seen as a frustration, but that wait time should start to reduce significantly throughout the year with the additional resources we've got. So that concludes the report. Thank you, Chairman.
Thank you, Richard. Have we any Councillor Clark?
Thank you. Richard, just a simple question really. You know when you send a team out with the gully flushers, clean the gullies, it's done now in a street, is it? You know, a street. What happens when they don't actually or can't get to one? Do they actually come back to it? And connected to that, if in the middle of the town, take any of the streets, Vernon Street, you know, Kirkby Street, etc. If you got cars parked there, how are you going to address that in the future with cleaning the gully pots out? Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Clark. The cyclic programme of flushing the gullies is done by maintenance area, actually, so it's more than just street by street, and a programme throughout the year is issued out for them, which they are performance managed on in terms of making sure they get around those in time. The actual jetting, which is also is informed just as much by customers reporting issues with drainage as it is as returns from the cyclic cleanse, where they will actually say, we've sucked this gully out, but it's not running, so there's an issue that requires further work there. We issue those jetting jobs street by street rather than gully by gully to do the 700 odd jobs I refer to will be streets rather than individual assets that are being cleaned through, because they need to essentially work from the outfall back to make sure water's getting away. I appreciate you bringing up parked cars. It is an issue. We've actually tried to do some work with the comms team just to put some polite messages out for people to understand that when we're there, we do. When we're reacting rather than doing that planned cycle, it gives us the opportunity to book a temporary traffic regulation order to prohibit parking and put no parking cones out, and we're starting to do that more and more often now to make sure it is clear to get into, because a lot of the issues in cities we do get is that they're just not accessible on the planned route. So we're trying to be more pre-planned about where we've had returns where often they haven't been able to access them because of being parked cars. We're taking them off the routine and we're putting them into specific, let's book a closure, let's put the comms out to say this road needs to be closed, don't park here. Having said that, we have examples where the public have moved the no parking cones and parked and put them back around their cars, so it's not a perfect solution, but we are trying to pick up those sites because they're meant to return once. If they go and try and can't get there on the routine, they will go back one more time to try another time, but then it will feed back into having to do something bespoke for that street.
Thank you for that, Richard. Okay, Councillor Clark, have we any other comments? No. I've just got one. I was pleased that Councillor Clark mentioned the parked cars because that was an issue from previous reports. But you mentioned in the report collaborative working across directorates and with partners. And are there any challenges that you've still got in those areas? Is there anything the committee could help you with as far as any challenges you might have with that?
No, I think that we work well across the different teams. Obviously, there's a huge volume of reports that it's touched in various reports today, the fact that even in the emergency world, when we had a storm event, we were getting 2,000 fixed my street reports, not in 2 weeks, but in 2 days. And just to keep on top of the severity of some of those, to make sure that we were responding to the people whose living rooms were underwater, there probably was a dip in quality in the automated responses where we were looking at other ones and thinking that that's not an immediate issue for now, that's something we need to come back to. We work with the floods and water team, obviously, to understand where the big picture flooding events are, where whole villages are underwater, and that we're talking about £1 million schemes there. But anything that's been reported as internal flooding on a Section 19, we're asking for the early insight of, is there anything within the highways asset that we can do pending the release of a flooding report if it's something that we can go in and fix, then obviously we're getting that. And Nathan Whitfield, who unfortunately not well today, but was going to potentially deliver this report, works closely with Matt Harrison in the Floods and Water team. He's our drainage asset owner for all of that. Without boring everyone too much, within my service area, I obviously have the local highways teams who do the reacting. But also within our drainage asset and cyclic works team, we've combined them now, so they deal with this cyclic cleanse of the network, as well as then any of those minor schemes that arise from things that the local teams can't do quickly or are fed back from the cyclic programme to do those sort of £20,000 to £50,000 schemes. We also do, the local highways teams, in the same way that they do for carriageway works, will submit detailed scheme briefs to say, there's a problem here, it wasn't the gullies were blocked, we haven't been able to fix little bits of the system to make it work, it's a much bigger issue, we think it's a priority, and we'll feed that up for consideration for larger capital schemes. So more so than ever, the teams are working together. I wouldn't say that there isn't ever room for improvement, and we're always striving to get it more streamlined that way. But we have tried to sort of align our resource throughout to be informed by what the actual problems and complaints are, and some of that's the quality of public reports that come back and making sure that that's all tied together well.
Yes, thank you for that, Richard. I was thinking, I mean, I'm aware of issues with culverts under highways and disputes about who's responsible for it. Is there anything that, and I mean, I'm crossing towards the flood and water management as well as highways there, but it is a highways issue, and I'm just wondering how we're making progress on that, because I am aware that there are disputes there.
I think there's always going to be disputes over culverts. It's unfortunately one of those things where you can go down the route of exploring the archives and looking for old hand-drawn maps of drainage and parish files from the 1800s. So establishing liability is always difficult. We recently met with, I met with the Floods and Water team and the representatives from the drainage boards to discuss the issue of culverts. I think that's had a promising outcome where we need to do a big picture exercise of just establishing who has got what on their systems and who thinks looks after what. In the highways world, we generally work to the rule of thumb that it's the liability that rests with what comes first. So if we've put a culvert in to build a road, that's ours to maintain. Sam will have that a lot in his world where we're building large new schemes, and if we've got to get water under it, we'll put a culvert in, we'll deal with that. If the culvert was already there and it was a farm track that has gradually become a road, it's not going to be an LCC asset. It's likely to be the adjacent landowners, unfortunately, that are responsible for that asset. However, I don't think we'll ever get to a position where we can be too black and white, because those adjacent landowners might be too just private individuals living in a bungalow or either side of the road, and to expect them to bring in a contractor to dig the road up and replace a culvert is maybe unrealistic. So we'd like to, in those situations, be pragmatic and work in partnership to get the best result for the public, rather than what can and has in the past resulted in a finger-pointing exercise. So I think that work is ongoing. We can bring updates back to committee in future just to look to see if there are any opportunities for support in those negotiations.
Yes, thank you, Richard. Yeah, I think it was important to bring that up, and you said the important thing there. At the end of the day, it's the public who are suffering, and we can't have a situation where there's delays in getting things fixed because we're having an argument with different people over who's responsible for it. So we've got to have a way forward there, and I would be interested to have an update on that the next time this report comes. It would be interesting to know what's happening there, and I'm sure Flood and Water Management would like to keep an eye on that as well.
Yes, thank you, Chair. I'm sure it is a joint report, because it sits across both worlds, because there will be a lot of culverts that are nowhere near a road that are also in dispute over who would maintain them. So it's a lead local flood authority position rather than strictly just highways. But I'm happy to bring an update back to the next committee paper on that.
Thank you very much. Thanks for that. Right, I'm going to move on now because no one else is indicating. And I'm going to move that the report be received and that our thanks be recorded for the detail contained in the report and assurances provided by officers in their presentation. Does anyone dissent? No dissenters, so that's carried then. Thank you. And we'll move on then to the last item on today's agenda, which is the committee work programme. And this is items on pages 255 to 260 of the agenda pack. And this item enables the committee to comment on the content of its work programme. The report will be presented by Chiara, our scrutiny officer, and our actions are to review the work programme and highlight any additional scrutiny activity which could be included for consideration in the work programme. So it's over to you, Chiara. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chairman. So since the circulation and publication of this report pack, there have been 2 additional updates on the work programme for this committee. So in our April meeting, we will have an additional item, which is following up on last year's consideration of an item on Anglian Water Streetworks performance improvements and the commitment made at that said meeting, which was on the 24th of April 2023, to monitor and seek progress update on the Streetworks Charter. and therefore an item has now been introduced to the work programme of this committee. In addition, we will receive an item around the Sinsel Bank Towns Fund scheme, which is going to be for pre-decision scrutiny, and the scheme is being funded through the Lincoln Town deal only. This item will be added on our agenda for the 10th of June 2024. And lastly, I would like to acknowledge items requested in today's meeting, which also will be reflected on the updated version of this Scrutiny Committee's work programme that will be presented at the next meeting. So with this in mind, I welcome any further suggestions made by members or officers. Thank you.
Thank you, Chiara. Councillor Strengle, you've got...
Thank you, Chairman, and thank you, Chiara. Just a question. I always check on the dates of the future meetings so that I can put them in my diary. And I've noticed the 3rd of December is a Tuesday. And I've never in the 11 years on this committee ever had a highways meeting on a Tuesday. Either that or I've got the wrong year in my diary. But I have double, triple checked to make sure it is, the 3rd is a Tuesday.
Thank you very much, Councillor Strengill. It is actually, in fact, the 9th of December that should have been quoted in the report, so I will make that amendment. Thank you very much for picking this up.
Thank you.
Thank you for that, Eddie. Thank you. Councillor Ashton, you wish to...
If I'm right in remembering, we did a few meetings ago have scheduled a visit from rail partners to this committee that I noticed they haven't been yet. I was just wondering when we were likely to see them, please.
No, I've asked for that to be included. I'm sure it is, isn't it? It is on the programme later on. In one of the... Yeah, no, we're aware of that. It's there, dressed up as something else, but it's there, definitely. Okay. Right, and any other? No, I've got one. Several meetings ago, and it might be a good part of 12 months ago, it was mentioned about having a report here on the progress of TROs, because there was quite a lot of a backlog of TRO investigations or surveys and being done, and taking quite a while for from it being put forward for a TRO to it actually being implemented. And I thought at that meeting we spoke about having a report on a regular basis on TRO performance and the numbers we got waiting, etc. And I'm just wondering if we could look at bringing a report like that, because you often hear members complaining that it's taking a long time to get this done and that done. I thought it would be worth us keeping an eye on it at this committee.
Certainly, I will liaise with the leading officer, Jean Gibson, to make sure that an item is added on the work programme for future reference. And just to go back to Councillor Ashton, the item on rail recovery and strategic role in providing connectivity, supporting Lincolnshire communities and economy, has been scheduled for the 10th of June.
Yeah. Okay, so, yeah. And there was just one more I'd got, the report on and comments made on Fix My Street today. I'm just wondering if we could have an item on the agenda where we concentrate on Fix My Street and issues and ways forward. I think it would be worthwhile the committee having some time on it rather than sort of it coming up in another report. So if we could have that, please, as well. Thank you.
Certainly, I will liaise with officers.
Thank you. Right. No other contributions, and I'm going to move that we note the report and approve the existing work programme as detailed in pages 49 to 56 and the additional items highlighted in discussion today. Does anyone dissent? No. That's carried then. So now we're there to the end of the meeting, and that now concludes the business of the meeting. Thank you everyone for your attendance, and a safe journey home or back to wherever you're going. Okay, thanks. Cheers. Thank you. That's not bad, 12:15. Yeah.